Welcome to Podcapers, the official podcast of a place to hang your cape. And this week, meet someone who makes me academically inadequate. We're talking about the relationship between fans and comic book creators. Cue the music! Hello there, Capers, and as I said, welcome to Podcapers, the official podcast of a place to hang your cape. My name's Scott James Merridew, and this is the show where we talk about various geek and nerd-related topics, and I'm joined each week by a very special different guest. Today's guest is Elise Sandbach. Say hello, Elise.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Very glad to have you on, because Elise, we know each other outside of the podcast, don't we?
Yes, we do.
We work at the same place. We're not going to say where. You'll have to figure it out for yourself, Capers! And you mentioned something that you're doing at the moment. What is that?
Yeah, so at the moment I am doing a PhD in text and image studies, which is basically comic books. And I'm looking specifically at the relationship between comic book fangirls, I guess, and their like female characters that they are fans of.
Which is a fascinating topic of study, especially now. And I love the fact that you can earn a doctorate by doing that. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, and I'm very lucky, especially because it's really weirdly came across doing it by doing a master's in history, and all of my like friends at my masters were doing like the Tudors or like Victorians or something, and I was like, so I'm gonna look at the 90s for like the comic books, but yeah,
Oh, that
luckily I got
far
away
off
with it.
period of antiquary, the 90s,
Yeah,
when boy bands roamed the land.
yeah, like real historical work going on there.
Oh, God, I mean, it's man, I was born in 1992, fast approaching 30. So, yeah, we're getting to the point where we can make cultural study of the 90s, unironically.
Yeah, definitely.
So, what exactly were you studying about the 90s? It was just like the effect of what's his face, guy who created Deadpool, Rob Liefeld's, impact on the medium in terms of how jacked all the men suddenly get, and how much more pockets and satchels they had.
Yeah, well, in the 90s as well, I think that there was an evolution kind of started with female characters and female creators, but especially I think I chose to kind of hone in on the 90s because that was when Harley Quinn was introduced, and I have spent like maybe a year and a bit now just analysing her from her very first appearance to like her most recent appearance and how she's changed over the years. So yeah, I think that's why I went with the 90s at first.
Yeah, actually, think about it. She was created in 1992, same year I was born.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, and she has gone through such an evolution from one off created for a TV show side character,
Hmm.
Mr. J, to a superhero, anti hero villain in her own right,
Hmm.
with her own creations in terms of like comics and TV shows and movies.
Hmm.
And it's rare that you see that kind of evolution. And we're going to get into all of that. But before we do that, we've got to talk about the news! Some interesting news. First of all, we've got some casting news for both Marvel and DC. Leslie Grace, who we most recently saw in the Heights movie, has been cast as Batgirl.
Yeah, I think that's great. I'm super, super happy with that. I think she'll do great.
I mean, I'm just happy that we're getting a Batgirl movie because Batgirl is one of the few DC characters I can actually stomach.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
actually, on the insistence of my editor, Alex Mirabal, I read the Batgirl of Burnside series and really liked it. So I'm hoping they do something similar to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're in a good position right now. Like after the success of like Birds of Prey, for example, like they can go either one or two ways here. They can like hone in on that success and do really well, or they can go the other way. But let's be optimistic and hope that it does well.
Yeah, I mean, especially since the whole thing came out with Joss Whedon trying to get it off the ground,
Yeah.
and that's not really, I mean,
Yeah, that didn't work out.
let's not talk about that. Other casting news over in Marvel. Michaela Coel has been, I don't know if that's how you pronounce her name, hopefully, has joined the cast of Black Panther Wakanda Forever, the star of the hit show I May Destroy You, which was snubbed, lest us not forget. Has joined the show. We don't know who she's going to be playing. There are rumors that she's going to be replacing Letitia Wright as Shuri. I'm not sure if that would work, but other rumors that she may be playing Storm, who in the comics is Black Panther's wife, among many other things. So, yeah, it's a great addition because she's a great actor.
Yeah, she's phenomenal. I would watch her do anything at this point, I think. Yeah, I May Destroy You, I think, changed my life. So honestly, I would follow her anywhere. I think it's interesting. I don't know, like, I haven't followed much on what they're planning to do with this movie, but I heard rumors that it might be a little bit like the Women of Wakanda comics. And in that case, it would be like so interesting to see where she goes with that. So yeah, super excited.
And either way, I'm sure whatever they do will be really good because Ryan Coogler's coming back. It will be great and it will live up to the great memory of Black Panther and Chadwick Boseman.
Mhm.
I'm sure whatever they do will be great. I'm just glad that they're hiring real talent,
Mm.
especially when it comes to real Black British talent. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Uh, then we have got some trailer news. The latest trailer for the upcoming sci-fi epic Dune has dropped, which I have not watched because it's 3 cocking minutes.
I do you know what? I've not watched it either, which is silly because this movie, I'm so excited for this movie. I think that, well, let's just say if it goes bad, which I don't think it will, because how could it? But if it did, there's so many like careers that are going to be ruined because the cast, there's so many different people, so many great actors, and if they go wrong with it, then there's going to be a lot of people not wanting to show their face again. But I don't think that'll happen. Like it can. The director's great, and obviously the source material is great, so it must be good.
David Lynch just popped over behind your shoulder saying, "Are you sure about that?" Because that's what people said in the 80s. Like, oh my god, we've got Kyle McLachlan, we've got fucking Picard. Forgot his name for a second. Patrick Stewart. Got all these great people. Sting! Sting was in. How could a movie with Sting possibly fail? Yeah, it was weird and uncomfortable. Do you ever read the Doom book by Frank Herbert?
Oh no, I've not read them.
I tried reading the first one and I couldn't really get through it because it was very much a case of I couldn't get into the world and I couldn't get into the characters because it's the worst kind of writing for me personally because it's stuff just happening and people barely having a reaction to it. I mean,
Oh
there is a
really?
reaction later on, but by that point you're like halfway through the book. It's like, oh, now you have something to say. Oh, now you've got like opinions and stuff, and you're expressing emotion. Jesus, too
Mm.
little, too late. Quizat, Haderat, give a dog a bone, whatever your name is. I don't care. Um, and so yeah, it's I'm sure it'll be great. I will see it when it comes out. I might even do a review on it. Who knows? But it'll be very interesting to see how that comes out. But I'm not watching a trailer that's 3 minutes, okay? Because that's the whole movie, okay? Half of that. Trailer should be half that. 1 minute, 30 seconds max. That's all
Yeah.
you need. Other news. This isn't breaking news, but it's something I want to talk about. Ted Lasso season 2 has premiered. I've watched the very first episode, and it's just as good as season 1. Did you watch season 1?
I didn't know. No, I know. That's so bad that I haven't seen it. What? Honestly, no. I don't think I know much about it. I mean, I've obviously heard of it. I've literally, it's been way under the radar for me. Did you like it? Is it good?
Here's the thing. I loathe football. I'm not interested in it at all. At work, we've talked about this. I do
Hmm.
not care. Um, but this show is about an American football coach coming over to England to coach a proper football team, and it made me care about that.
Oh, well, yeah. That I mean, yeah, that sounds good. And is Jason Sudeikis good in it?
He's excellent in it. Here's the thing: it started out as a joke. It was a series of ads that was done for like FIFA or something, I don't know, where Jason Sudeikis is like, "Oh, I'm an American football coach, and I don't know how football, or as y'all call it, soccer." Oh wait, you don't call it that? Comes over here, and it was like a series of funny ads.
Hmm.
And then they thought, "Hey, maybe there's something here." They turned to a TV show, but you know what they did? They gave it heart. real emotional sincerity and depth for all the characters. And it actually became like this really positive, like there's some shows that are just like spars for your mind.
Mm-hmm.
This is that. It's a relentless sense of optimism and positivity and character growth, and you just fall in love with all of the characters, and all of the characters of depth. Even the characters you're not really meant to like are
Mm-hmm.
shown to be completely human with understandable motivations and goals, and no one's a stereotype. You think this show would rely on stereotypes like, oh, it's American who doesn't understand football, and yeah, they make jokes about that on occasion, but no one becomes a stereotype. No one gets put down. Everyone becomes just so lovable and interesting and deep and kind, and it's amazing. So go and watch it already.
Yeah, no, I mean, you've definitely sold me. I guess that's what I'm doing tonight.
It's football is life.
I know I'll start following football and everything for real.
And maybe not, considering recent developments in British football. Maybe not. Just stick with this show. That's another thing. I hope they do in this season, at least, because they didn't really do it in the last season. I hope they tackle racism of football and the effect that can have, because that's something that needs to be talked about. So
Yeah.
hopefully they do that, but we'll see. Last bit of news. Also, a new premiere, Masters of the Universe Revelation, has finally come out on Netflix. The Kevin Smith reimagining / continuation of the classic He-Man show has finally come out. Part 1, at least. Part 2 is forthcoming. Things like 4 or 5 episodes. I've only seen it for the first episode, and I can tell you, as someone who never was really into He-Man, like I watched a few episodes of the 2002 version, but that was it. There was a guy on that show who had a neck that extended, like a robot neck, and he saved the day when there was poison gas attacking the castle, and that's what his toy is about. In any case, Masters of the Universe Revelation came out. Looks pretty good. It's got an all-star cast. I mean, I'll watch anything with Sarah Michelle Gellar in it. That's just the law.
Yeah, of course.
What's interesting about this show, though, is apparently it's being review bombed on Rotten Tomatoes. Critics love it. They say it's great. Audiences, apparently, and when I say audience, I mean the loudest voices in the audience, hate it, giving it 1-star reviews. And this is fascinating to me, because this is like an inverse The Orville, where the critics loved it, but audiences loved it. Now, the reverse is true. And it makes me wondering, like, are these fans of the original show that wanted to return to the campy, hey, yay, 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 or people who wanted a more serious take on it that were left mildly miffed by the fact that the show sort of balances both elements, at least in the first episode? I don't know. All I know is Mark Hamill's Skeletor and not Alan Oppenheimer, but Alan Oppenheimer is in it as Mossman. Like, what's going on? Like, what? How come I've been recast? This is Skeletor you're talking about. I'm not some side character. I was in those muddy supermarket adverts. I just needed an opportunity to do my Skeletor voice. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was great.
Anyway, so yeah, this is kind of interesting. I'm interested to see where this goes. I've only seen the first episode. Have you seen any of the episodes yet?
I haven't, but I have fallen into the trap before of watching things that have been like really well reviewed on Rotten Tomatoes by critics and not actually looking at the audience score before watching it. Because obviously, when you first Google something, it's only the critic score that comes up unless you actually like go onto it. And usually it's not good. Like usually, if the audience says it's really bad and the critics say it's good, something's not being communicated right there. Like something's going off. So I mean, I give it a shot. Like definitely. I mean, as you said, the cast is great. But yeah, if the audience are that strongly against it, it kind of has alarm bells to me.
This is the problem when you're dealing with something which has such a huge cultural nostalgia death grip on people. So it'd be interesting to see how that turns out. Unfortunately, something less interesting is turning out right now, Capers. We've got some ads! Check them out!
And now we're pleased to bring you our feature presentation.
And we're back. So, Elise, you talked a bit about the sort of stuff you're doing and stuff you have done. So, let's just delve a bit more deeper into you. I want to probe into your deepest, darkest insecurities right now, if you don't mind.
Oh, of course, that's all right.
So, your doctorate that you're doing right now, what goes into that? What is some of the stuff you need? Because I once considered getting a doctorate in pop culture or
hmm
a writing aspect, but then I realized probably shouldn't do that because A, it put me even deeper into debt than I already am. I'm not earning a lot. And also, I realized I basically just wanted it so I could get people to call me Dr. Meridew because I need that in my life.
Yeah, I mean that is certainly a plus. I won't lie, but yeah. So the doctorate is really going to involve, for me anyway, looking at like I'm going to pick a few different female superheroes, and I'm going to look into their fans and their fan behavior, specifically fan fiction. So that's kind of what I like to focus on the most. Although I think cosplaying and stuff are important aspects, but my main interest is in fan fiction, and the reason for that is because, well, firstly, there's so much fan fiction written on female superheroes, but they
I'm
also
aware.
yeah, it's good. It's like once you like if you just start reading it, you fall down an absolute like hole, and there's so much to explore there.
Oh, I
But
don't read them. I'm just been made aware of them by other people who've come on this show. We talked
oh,
about fanfiction a couple of times. Like, I'm afraid to dip my toe in that water because what if I fall in love? I can't have my heart broken again.
no, I honestly think that you would. I think that before, if anyone recommended fan fiction to me before I like started looking at it, I'd be like, right, okay. But now it's just, or I think it's just an amazing way of like interacting with characters and with texts that you love, and an amazing way of like exploring things further that either haven't been explored, like in whichever genre, like whatever medium it is, if it's a TV show, a movie, or a comic book. So like reading things that haven't been explored, or like getting closure on things that like happened that you didn't like. So like,
Or
if a
things
death
that didn't
happens.
happen that you wanted to happen, like.
Oh, for heaven's sakes, just kiss, you moron!
I mean, yeah, exactly that. I mean, that's what the main thing is, isn't it? It's like shipping wars between yeah, however many characters that they want. I honestly think
Katara should have been with Zuko!
yeah. Well, do you know what? I actually agree with that. But
Hey, Mai was an unrecognized gem in that show. She was stalwart, she was badass, she had knives up her sleeves, she got all
yeah.
sorts going on.
Oh no, I loved her. I did actually love her, but like Zuko is probably my favorite character, and I just felt like there was, a development, tension, everything with Katara, and also, it was like the first like enemies to lovers thing that I'd ever encountered as a
That's
child.
rough, buddy.
I was like, this is what I need in my life.
Oh, this speaks to me in a dark, deep place. Absolutely, yeah. And so this is the thing. This is what I find fascinating about the work you're doing right now, is because at what point do fans stop being reliant on creators and start becoming creators themselves?
I think, yeah, I mean, that's exactly, you've like hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what I want to find out. But I think that it's like almost quite instantaneous, especially with comic books. Comic books have such a unique relationship with fans, in that I would argue that comic books are the only form of medium where you really see creators listening to fans and incorporating stuff that the fans wanted for so long. For
Both good
example,
and bad.
yes. Well, yeah, exactly. So there's like, listening to fans in a way that you're just kind of pandering to them, and then also in a way where you're like actually having like constructive criticism. Even then, you do have to keep in mind that at the end of the day, they do want to sell comics, so they will listen to fans to in order to sell them. It's not always
I'm
going to
sorry,
be.
I thought they were a charity that were giving me exactly what I want in form of mindless escapism.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, that's maybe that might be a cynical view. I mean, maybe they do listen to fans because like they do want to like evolve and grow. But I mean, when money's involved, you do have to think, there's an end goal to all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. What really speaks to the mind of the, modern day millennial Gen Z youth? How about we do new warriors and one of them is called Snowflake? Excellent idea. Promote that man.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and that's probably happening in like a Marvel or DC boardroom right now, isn't it?
Both of them. Let's not. I mean, there is. I mean, the rift between creator and I nearly said createe. That would just be like the actual creations themselves. The rift from fans has not always been there. So when do you think the point of origin in terms of, we actually start to need to listen to what our audiences are saying happened? When did that come about?
Well, I actually think this is when like gender might come into it a little bit, because there's been studies on like gendered reading practices and how they differ, and a lot of the time they found that like men, when they read, and this obviously wouldn't be a blanket rule, but they are more
man!
they're more likely to like accept the authority of the creator, and to like engage when they did their study. I believe it was on Twin Peaks, and that like when people were trying to figure out how Twin Peaks was going to end, and they looked at like how men were trying to figure it out, and what men were doing when they were looking at the director and they were looking at other work he did and what he'd done there to try and figure out how he would end Twin Peaks. And women were thinking about like the Twin Peaks characters themselves, and they were very much like, oh, but they wouldn't do that. Like they would do this as if they could like work it out within the like fictional universe. And I think that that's what, I mean, fan fiction's also been described as like an institutionalization of a feminine reading practice, and that women like put themselves in the fictional world and they try and like figure out what's going on by like relating to the characters. So you'll hear women say things like, oh, Harley Quinn wouldn't do that, whereas men would be like the like have more of like, but the director wrote her to do that.
Which here's the thing though, when you have a character like that is passed on from creator to creator, where does the authority truly lie?
Yeah, exactly. But I would argue that a lot of the time it does lie with the fans, because, I mean, especially with something like Harley Quinn, like she obviously started off, as you said, like as a sidekick in a TV show, and then when she moved into the comics, she was not like going to be a main character, and then she was kind of like grabbed by fangirls, I think, and like really, really like championed by them. And if it wasn't for that like kind of support and like writing fan fiction and dressing up as her and stuff, I don't think they would have bothered to develop her. And you can see it with Black Widow as well. That's probably like a more recent example with
Yeah.
like people were asking for a Black Widow movie from like the very first Avengers movie, and I don't think
I know, I was one of them.
Where are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I
was asking for a Black Widow movie, and I was asking for more development of Loki, and I got both, and one was good and one was bad. Side note, Keepers, sorry you missed the episode last week. We were doing Loki. Audio got corrupted. Upshot, it was good. Minor problems here and there, but you know what? Richard E. Grant pulled it out in the end. Moving on.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a good year for you then, hasn't it? With both of those coming out, if that was like your wishes.
It's been a fucking busy year. How many shows can Marvel do?
I know. I mean, soon everything's going to be Marvel, isn't it? We'll have Marvel everything.
I'm okay with that.
Do you know what? I mean, yeah, I guess I'm okay as well. Apart from the fact that like Disney owns them now, and like pretty soon we'll have like Disney, like doorbells or something. Like Disney will take over absolutely everything.
I used to have a job when I was going door to door, signing people up to a charity, and I've heard Disney doorbells. I've heard them in Scotland, just unashamedly, unironically. Someday my prince will play right as you press the doorbell, and you just think, oh God, what sort of social reject lives in this decrepit house?
Oh God. I mean, each to their own, I suppose, but that does make me think that we're going down a bad hill here.
Well, that was grim.
You're not wrong. Oh God, yeah. I mean, here's the thing. I hope Disney, with Marvel, so far at least, have taken the role they have with Pixar, which is like maybe the occasional creative tweak, but ultimately just take the cash at the end of the day and let them do their own thing.
Yeah.
My big problem with Disney, among my many other problems, is that they're trying to establish a cinematic monopoly. It's not just Marvel. Marvel is just but one piece in their gigantic labyrinthian chess puzzle that they're trying to play against us. They're trying to own every studio and have like the entire every month from cinema releases has to have at least one Disney movie in it, if not in the cinema, then certainly on their streaming platform for an additional $30!
I know. That's shocking, isn't it? I can't believe. I mean, do you know anyone that actually pays that for the like cinematic release of them?
Yes!
Oh man. No.
Sad, desperate losers who are just slaves to Disney's corporate whip. I'm, of course, referring to my good friend Mark Russell, who's been on the show many times. I'm sorry, Mark, you need help. Just
That
saying.
I was desperate to see Black Widow, but I can't pay for it. I just cannot pay that much for it. I can't do it.
And obviously, I know it's tricky now because people want to see it, and going to the cinema for a lot of people is not an option. It was for me, thankfully, but yeah, it's tricky. I get it, but it's the most egregious form of unfettered, reckless capitalism that boils my blood. So yeah, and this is the thing. At what point do creators realize, oh, we got a female character? Oh, the audiences, the female audiences in particular, love this female character. Let's market the shit out of this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at Harley Quinn, it didn't happen very quickly. It took a long time for them to actually like look at her. And even then, there's still issues. Like I think of the relationship between Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn as a completely fan-made relationship, and that
knows no gender!
and that they didn't there was hints and stuff in the comics, of course, but there was no real like development of them until Fangirl stepped in and said, this reads to me like a relationship, and they were comparing
No, they gay now.
yeah, but when you look at like the relationship between Joker and Harley Quinn and how it's portrayed, and like even the first comic, like he's horrible to her, and then you have the comic creators.
You'll get over it, Harley. It's just a punch in the face.
Yeah, at the end of Mad Love, she's in the hospital. Like, he throws her out of a window. And we're told, oh no, but that's a relationship. And then they show us Poison Ivy and a loving relationship. And they're like, but that's a friendship. And I think Fangirls kind of went...
And they were roommates.
Yeah, exactly. And Fangirls were like, no, hold on, that doesn't make sense. I don't agree with that. And there's an academic called Gareth Schott, and he, I hope I'm saying that right, but he kind of termed this or coined this phrase. It's fan appropriation to industry reappropriation.
I call it Sappho and her friend.
But yeah, so like I think the fans saw what they believed to be a relationship because it was constructed as a relationship, and then they wrote it and ran with it, and then I think creators saw what they were doing and thought, okay, yeah, let's do that. But DC especially were really, really bad, and I mean, I don't think are much better anymore, but it, like,
well, we know that because of the infamous "let the bat eat the cat" debacle, which I can't believe we're still talking about, but here we are.
Of course. And DC were DC were the last comics to drop the like comic code authority. They only dropped it in like 2011, and it was like at that point there had been, I mean, out with superhero comics, there had been popular queer comics, and they were like really quickly growing as some of the fastest. I mean, if you think of Fun Home, which is like a story about like a queer there's a queer child like going like with her parents going through a divorce, I think, and that's now a musical, so like that's so wildly successful, and it took DC so long to first of all drop the code authority to allow them to have any kind of LGBT representation, and even then when they do have it, especially with Harley and Poison Ivy, it's really like queer baiting. It's really like little hints and little like subtext here and there, but they wouldn't really explicitly say it.
Yeah, I mean, it's they're trying to have the cake and eat it too, like avoid pissing people off, but also it's the same thing that, ironically, Disney is doing in their films, but not with Marvel. At least not with the Marvel comics, Marvel films, maybe kind of. But yeah, I mean, DC have always been resistant to that. I remember when Marvel, I say remember like I was there, I wasn't there, but when Marvel was doing this whole thing in Spider-Man where Harry Osborn gets addicted to drugs, and the Comics Code Authority was just like, oh, blah, 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 you can't do that, absolutely not. And Marvel was just like, fuck you, this is an important subject, and we want to address it appropriately, especially as we've got a younger audience. We need to let them know about the danger of this kind of stuff. And so they said, screw you, Comics Authority, we're doing it. And DC was like, oh, you silly little things. We would never dream of defying our big daddy Comics Code Authority. We'll do our own drug thing, but we'll do it when the Comics Authority say we can and how they say we can. And that resulted in Green Arrow discovering that Speedy, ironically, was a drug user, and immediately kicking him out of the house and being verbally abusive towards him. Whereas Spider-Man comforted his friend Harry and tried to help him as best he could. Two very different mindsets. And honestly, I don't think that mentality has really gone away. For better or worse, criticize Marvel all you like, love DC all you like. I think that mentality maintains.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to the fact that they do want to sell as many comics as possible, so they keep things like vague, and like just so that they're pleasing like as many people as they can, so that they're
I mean,
not gonna.
this is why in the Batman Girl Burnside thing I mentioned, there was a very transphobic character. As good as that series was, there was a very transphobic character in that. But at the same time, in I think it was Batwoman, there was a very positive trans character. And you could argue that's just two different creators doing two different things. One knows what they're talking about and one doesn't. But at the same time, it's this mentality of have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
And it's you can't. You can't do that. If you're a company that claims to stand for inclusivity and positivity and equality and because every time Pride Month rolls around, all the companies wave the Pride flags. DC, although, managed to fuck that up again this year because they introduced like a special thing. I think it was like the Injustice 2. I don't know if it was like the mobile game or the console game, but they had this thing like for Pride Month, here's a thing where you have to constantly beat up Poison Ivy.
Because that's what we want.
And they thought that was appropriate. Just like, no, that's not what.
Oh, the complete and indescribable anguish.
It's just completely wrong because they don't know what they're talking about. Maybe they know more about what they're talking about if they, hired more queer people. But that's just me.
Yeah, well, I think DC just seems slower to catch up with everything at the moment, don't they? Like, if you look at even just Marvel Cinematic Universe and then DC, and you're like, what? Like, why can't you just hire the people that Marvel have hired? Like, what's going on here? Because
I've been laughing since 2011. I talk about this constantly. I just remember seeing the box of returns for Thor, and then seeing the box of returns for Green Lantern, and I laughed and I laughed and I laughed.
Yeah.
Oh god, they've never really recovered. And I get that, especially with the cinematic universe, to go on a brief tangent, I get that they want to do things a bit different from Marvel, and that's fair enough. But here's the thing. Marvel's way of doing that was incredibly successful. Their way has not been. I don't care how much you like Shazam. I don't care how much you like the Snyder Cut. It's not gone well. This is a broken, tattered mess of a cinematic universe, and it's amazing they've been able to hold on this long, and apparently they're not going to be holding on for much longer anyway.
Yeah, well, even Harley Quinn's one of their top-selling comic book characters. Like in the comic books, people buy Harley Quinn's. I believe she's in the top 10, and
she's DC's Deadpool.
Yeah, without Margot Robbie though, that movie would never have been made. Why are you seeing something be so successful in the comics and not thinking, oh, we should make a movie of that? Like she had to, she used her own production company firstly, and she also had to really, really pioneer for that movie to be made. Which it wasn't I have issues with the movie, but just in the fact that obviously it should have been made. There should have been someone connecting the dots and thinking, she's doing so well, and also there's a real.
So you have issues with the Birds of Prey movie or the original Suicide Squad movie?
Oh, well, both. Oh, but the Suicide Squad movie, probably the most issues. When I went to see that movie, I went with my friend and I honestly turned to her throughout it and I was like, I don't believe that somebody watched this and thought, yeah, that's done. We finished editing it, it can go off. It seemed like it wasn't finished.
No, it was finished, and then they looked at Guardians of the Galaxy and thought, we need to finish it again, but different. And that's why it didn't work. Well, that's one of the reasons why it didn't work. And, I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, consider that the DC is willing to fart out a Batman movie every other year.
Yeah. Oh, my God, yeah.
I mean, not just in live action, but also animated. In fairness, the animated stuff works much better, in my opinion. I just watched the other day part 1 of The Long Halloween, and that was really good. And I'm just thinking, I'm having a much better time watching this than I have been with almost any other Batman movie released live action in years.
Yeah, of course. I was just about to say I'm actually excited for the Robert Pattinson Batman, and then I was like, but am I?
Why?
Yeah, exactly. Is it going to be good? I don't know. I feel like they keep giving so many people a shot at Batman, and I just feel like we've seen him enough now. Come on, I don't want to know about how his parents died again. Something else happened, please.
I want a Jessica Cruz Green Lantern movie. That's what I want. Failing that, a Carl Rayner one, but Jessica Cruz. And this is. Oh God, I mean, this is the whole thing. Is like with the current makeup, in big air quotes, of the Justice League.
Hmm.
I mean, Marvel made strides because, like, at first with Avengers there was only Black Widow, but since then, and admittedly they have made more movies than DC, they've included other great female characters, and will continue to have other great female characters. But I just remember that bit in Endgame where they had all the female superheroes in one big shot.
Oh, it was so cringe. It was so bad, honestly.
Yeah, but it was also kind of satisfying when you look at DC and then you realize they don't have nearly enough female characters currently in order to do that. I mean, well, they do, but they put them in all in one movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's satisfying in the sense that you're right. If DC did it, there would be like 3 people there. There wouldn't be enough. But also,
There'll
like,
be Wonder Woman.
yeah, Harley Quinn. Well, I mean,
Would she be?
yeah,
Would she
exactly.
turn up for the Justice League? That's the thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, Wonder Woman.
It's just her.
Yeah. Holding the fort down like always.
At least she's not in the 80s anymore. Anyway, and God, so moving on. So, and this is the thing. This is where, I mean, how big a part do you think things like, and I hate saying this phrase because it makes my blood boil, market research comes into it? What's the difference between listening to the fans and conducting polls, per se?
Yeah, well, I think whether it's conducting polls or just, I think creating comic books always comes with like quite a large cultural analysis. Because they
You
always
don't say.
I mean, has anyone said that before? I'm joking.
It's
But
my job.
I'm joking. But like, I mean, it's not like it's not. I mean, it's obvious that the in comic books are like mirror into like whatever society's valuing like at the moment, right? Like they whatever was being talked about, like comic books will probably show in some way. And I think
Well,
that
I mean, you're on the larger scale, on the big picture, you're right. But I think on a smaller scale, there have been instances, even within big major name comic books, where actually sometimes have been ahead of the game. I'm looking at Marvel here, the early days, the 60s, and even before that. It's I don't know. I feel like sometimes they actually hold slightly better values than might be held by society at large on occasion. There's
yes.
many more instances where that wasn't the case, but
But do you not think that comic books maybe represent like the underground? So like whenever like there's a kind of cultural change happening, it kind of starts in like underground and therefore like in underground comics first. And I think a lot of the time big like powerhouses like Marvel and DC look at what's happening in underground comics and kind of take them and put them in their like larger ones. And that's maybe like, for example, like queer comics started really kicking off with success in like 70s and 80s, and it was like such a like underground culture. And so was like, I mean, like female led comics as well, like really kicking off like just in like fan made ones or like zines or something like that. And I think that they looked at it and they like started putting it in their comics almost so it's like it's ahead of the game in that it maybe doesn't represent like all of society at that time, but I think it represents like the progressive side almost. Like I think they do try and like lean towards Marvel. I mean, maybe not DC, but like Marvel especially lean towards the kind of like more progressive side, because when you look back at it, they do have,
they
I
had the
mean,
first gay wedding
yeah,
in comic book
exactly.
history. They had lots of, I mean, in the 60s, they had lots of great, strong, interesting, non-stereotyped black superheroes. I mean, they had their fair share of blunders, let's be honest, same as any other comic creator. But, I mean, Black Panther, we talked about them earlier, there were there was no one else doing something like that, something so respectful and cool. And they've continued that, and there will be blunders, as we
Yeah.
said, but and this is the thing, you see, this is what the question I often find myself asking myself: when they make something that is good and progressive, is that because they genuinely believe in that sort of thing, or is it because that comes out of a desire to get into the market and sell things? Like you said earlier, everything is being made to be sold. I mean, because like we look at the rise in popularity of things like manga and anime, and now a ton of Marvel things are anime based or manga inspired. It's just like,
Yeah.
oh my god, guys, we've got to make things more kawaii.
But if you think about the people that want to become comic book creators, at least on the scale of like Marvel and um, DC, I mean, probably not just on that scale. Probably anyone that's a comic book creator, there's a passion and an art to it as well, and there must be a lot of their own like identity and like political views and stuff in that. So I think that there's a balance perhaps between people like creating these comic books with the best of intentions from their own creation, and then also you got to balance pleasing the fans and then also pleasing like your overlords, like whoever's telling you, you know, that you've got to make this amount of money from this. So there's a
Not
lot of
yours, children.
there's a lot going on, I think, but like I do like to think that they want to incorporate or want to listen to fans because, you know, fans matter, and fans, I think the relationship between comic book fans and comic creators is a real like special one because it almost is a collaborative process. And I think that as like comic books or as you said, like they're quicker to adapt and quicker to grow to like whatever society is like talking about at the moment. And I think you can see with, not that feminism is new in any kind of capacity, but it's not like a coincidence that in the last few years, like from the Me Too movement, that we've also had like is more, or like what must be like 110% more female superhero movies than we've ever had. Like before we had to
Not
rely.
that there have been some people resistant to that. Again, going back to Marvel, I'm talking about that infamous leaked, I think it was Meaty Notes or something, about this one old crusty Marvel executive who said, "Oh, we can't do female-led movies because Elektra was a bad movie."
Yeah,
What the fuck has
well,
that got to do with anything? Steel was a bad movie.
yeah, I think that's because there was like a miscommunication on what they thought that like female-led superheroes had to be like that they thought that it had to, they really wanted, you know, or there was a miscommunication between what they should do for a female superhero that would please everyone and like would please men and
But you
women.
can't please everyone, and nor should you. Niche audiences are the way to go, and you can have broad appeal, but you can't have universal appeal.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I think that's, but then when they were trying to please everyone, I feel like a lot of the time the characters came off so confusing. Like Wonder
Mm.
Woman, you know, back in the day, like what was she? I mean, not to like disparage because obviously Wonder Woman was also great, but at the same time, like a caricature of a woman. I was like, that doesn't make like she's not a woman to me. And then you see,
She was just a person who was into bondage.
yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah, of course. And then I think, I mean, I've not seen the Black Widow movie, so I can't actually like say if this is what happens, but I've heard that it's like very grounded and that, you know, Black Widow does come off.
As- it, I don't want to spoil things for you,
Hmm.
but it initially appears to be that way, and then it stops.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, I mean, even if you think of Black Widow, like on her story arc through like Avengers itself, how they had to throw in that because she couldn't have children, she was like, she felt like she was a monster. And I
Oh
think,
god.
yeah, women are so
Ugh.
sick of seeing that, and it's thrown into your face in fantasy all the time, like whether it's superhero fantasy or I don't know,
I
like,
may be a scientist, but I'm also a woman. And if a
yeah,
woman can't create life, then she's not a woman anymore. That's not how it
exactly.
works.
And I'm like, I've never heard a woman say that. Like, I don't know where you're here, like where they get this idea
People
from.
don't talk like that.
Yeah, of course.
Caricatures talk like that.
Yeah, and that was so annoying about Black Widow is we were like, yes, we finally have a female character, it's going to be great. And then the next movie we had of her, she was like crying about like not being able to have children, and obviously not being able to have children is a very serious and sad thing. That's not, but like it just kind of felt totally out of the blue, and I was like, that doesn't make her. They always try and like make the female character about her womb in
And
the
let's
end.
give I was about to say the movie, but really we're talking about Joss Whedon here. Let's hesitantly give him the benefit of the doubt and say that that wasn't his intention, and they
Hmm.
want to say, oh no, she's a monster because she's murdered people. That
Hmm.
would be interesting, but that's not how it comes across. And this is when we get into the male gaze. Dun dun dun.
Yeah. I mean, I think Josh Whedon would just benefit from like hiring some kind of female co-writer at this point, like someone that can like he can actually say like, do women speak like this? And they'll be like, no, that doesn't happen. Um,
You think working on Buffy the Vampire Slayer for all those years would mean he would know that, but
yeah.
apparently not, considering the way he treated Charisma Carpenter on that show.
Well, that's just really upsetting, like everything that's came out about him, because Buffy was like, and is seen as one of the first like feminist kind of stories. Like it was something like for women where it wasn't all about like the fact that she was a woman and you know she was powerful and she was capable of this stuff. And to hear like the kind of stuff coming out about Josh Whedon now, it's like, it's just
But
so
you know
disappointing.
what? The shows he's created are still great, as you say, but I don't think it's because of him. Like, because so many women did work on those shows, and they helped make them
Yeah.
great. People like Sarah Michelle Gellar and
Mhm.
Charisma Carpenter, Marina Baccarin, Jules Stade, not to mention all the people behind the camera,
Mhm.
and Eliza Dushku, all these great people, and that's why we still remember them. That's why we still talk about them, and that's why he's still great, and that's why he's going to struggle to have any kind of job in Hollywood ever again.
He gonna get it!
Yeah, I mean, we hope so. But, like, there's people that seem to still get hired again,
Yeah.
even after they've done worse things. So
Mel
hopefully-
Gibson just refuses to lay down and die.
yeah, exactly.
And so this is when we get into the biggie, female-led creations, female-led comic books. Because I've talked about this on the show before when talking about with the people from the YouTube channel Creating Women about how there are so many great female characters that I like, but when it comes to female creators, I can name some, but
Mhm.
nowhere near as many as I can male creators, and that's a problem.
Yeah, I agree. I think
I'm
that,
part of the problem.
but I think, yeah, but so am I. Like, I would struggle as well. Like, I think, like, noticing that, like, we all maybe are a little bit part of the problem is probably one of the first steps. I think, yeah, like, you can have all these great female characters, but are we really getting female stories? Like, are we really having female stories written by women and that like are for women? Because
It doesn't
I don't
help that
think
when
so.
we do get that, often they face incredible backlash. Like there's this one comic from DC where it's like this girl, but it's like Starfire's her mother. Have you heard of this one?
I haven't heard
And
of this one, no.
but she's like, oh, she's an overweight goth gay character, and Starfire's different, and she hates her because of it. And by all accounts, it's not a good comic, but and deserves to be criticized as such. But the amount of backlash that it received, one might consider disproportionate to the amount of backlash that a comic by a male writer would receive.
Well, yeah, see, I think that in everything, if you are seen as like pandering to women, even if you aren't, like if that's what people are suggesting you do, that receives so much more backlash than pandering to men. I never hear anyone say, oh, like they're pandering to like straight heterosexual people. Like you never hear that. It's always
Oh my god, this is directed, marketed, and demographed directly towards me. I feel so insulted.
yeah, well, yeah, of course, that's probably why they don't say it. But like anytime you hear, oh, they're just doing that, like so, like they're just pandering to those people, it's because it's got an LGBT story in it or a female like lead, and it's like, but so what? Like, why is it
The
only
doctor
bad?
can't be a lady.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like, there's so many instances of that happening. I mean, this is like totally out of topic, but I was just thinking there of like the second Last of Us game.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and like that was a great game. That was so good. And when I heard about the backlash, I was honestly shocked, and it was all coming from like because you played two women the whole time, and like one of them was gay. There was also a trans character, and I was like, why does that matter? Like, why would that make you like go against the game? And people were like, oh, it's just because like they were like, it's not because they've done that. It's because they're only doing it to appeal to people. And I was like, but you've been appealed to your whole life. Like let them explore something else now.
My cup runneth over with stuff that's representative of me and my experience, people who look like me, people who sound like me. I'm done. I could never see another heterosexual, cisgendered, white British man ever again in media, and I'd be fine because I've got so much stuff in the past that I could still look at.
Yeah.
Honestly, the only thing that I'm really missing in terms of representation is demisexual characters. Seriously, distinct lack. I'm not happy, even though I only discovered I was demisexual this year. But still,
Yeah.
I need it backdated.
Well, yeah, no, I agree. Like, there's so much more that they could be explored, and it should be like I don't like. and do you want to go to the cinema and just see yourself on the like, I understand that people that haven't, and like marginalized communities, they want that and they should have that, but like you go to enjoy other stories and to like hear others' perspectives and stuff like that. So why can't we have diverse perspectives, and why can't we
Step
like
outside of yourself and
yeah.
experience a wider, brighter world.
Yeah, and it certainly like personally upsets me when they say that they won't go and see it because like it's a girls' movie, or like it's for
What the
women or
fuck
something
does
like
that
that.
mean? Like,
It's
I know certain films are marketed towards certain demographics. Like, some movies are marketed towards women more than they are men, and some movies are marketed more to men than women. But that doesn't stop individuals from enjoying them. I fucking love me a rom-com. You know what I watched the other day? I watched this movie I had never heard of called The American President, and it's about the President of the United States, played by Michael Douglas, going on a date with this woman that he really likes, played by Annette Bening, and it's a lovely story. It made me cry.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I think stories about like rom-coms have such like a terrible like what
Dismissive
prejudice.
sort of
Yeah, like
thing.
it's just like it's rom-com, but like I mean, think of Bridget Jones' Diary. Like that was an Oscar. I think it was an Oscar-winning movie. Like that was a great movie, and it was like I think why can we not have value in like female stories? And that's something like actually why women are so, or the theory is why women write fan fiction so much about male or like traditionally male stories. So like Star Trek was probably one of the first things that women really started to write fan fiction about. And I say women because it was predominantly, and it is predominantly, women that write fan fiction. And they were writing about Star Trek, and they were writing about like they were writing relationships about like Spock and Kirk, and they were really like involved with it. And the reason why, or one of the reasons that they give, is because it's the women have and are kind of taught to like adapt to male stories. So women watch male stories all of the time, and they have to find things in it that they that speaks
Fit
to them.
yourself into this thing rather than this thing fit itself to you.
Exactly, and they do that, and they're so adept at doing that now because they've done it for so long. Whereas, and so they can find value in male stories, and of course they can, because like I can like a masculine story, like have masculine traits, like we're not just one thing. So, but like I think that men maybe don't have as much experience of like appreciating and understanding like female-led stories because
And when they do, they're immediately shut down for it. I mean,
yeah,
God knows in school, I couldn't talk about that kind of thing with most people because otherwise,
yeah,
ugh. And I'm seeing this time and time again when people like Harry Styles and Jared Leto
hmm
wear something even outside of the traditional masculine norm.
hmm
Not their gender identity, their sexuality, everything about them is questioned, if not insulted, which
yes,
is pointless. I mean, I think it was Eddie Izzard who once said, "I don't wear women's clothes. I'm a man." Well, he's trans now, but
hmm
they're my clothes. I bought them. That's all that should matter. I mean,
yeah,
fucking hell. You know what? It's summertime. If I had the legs for it, I'd wear a dress. I
yeah.
don't, but still.
And it's so funny how much we hold on to like stereotypes like this, because dresses were like men wore dresses, men wore high heels. Like high heels were made for
We live
men
in
at first.
Scotland. What's the kilt if not a skirt?
Yeah, exactly. And it's so funny how whatever like our society now, everyone's like those are the rules, and you're just like, do you understand that the rules have changed so much and like will change 100 years from now? You'll be like everyone will be wearing dresses probably, or like not. Like it's not gonna. It never stays static. But people really, really like want, or are stuck to the rules that we are currently in.
Yeah,
And I think that's a shame.
we're constantly you think, oh, this is how it's been and how it's always been, but how it's always been compared to a lot of history is an infinitesimally small amount of time.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And how it's always been, like that statement, it's just so like nothing's always been, like it's so different. It's
Nothing is
like
true, everything is permitted.
see when like people hear that like once a kind of historical figure was actually a massive racist, and they're like, oh, but he was a man of his time. I always want to scream because I'm like, there's no such thing. At the time, people were against it. Like at the time, people were like protesting against it. There's no such thing. There's never been a time where something was just accepted. Like people are like,
Oh,
oh, that's
H.P.
just how.
Lovecraft shouldn't be, like, criticized for that because everyone was racist. No, people, even other racist people, criticize them like, okay, like, we're racist, but that's too racist, H.P.
Yeah,
Why are you so afraid of Latina people? Come on.
yeah.
It's yeah. People always know right from wrong. I mean, for God's sake, Arthur Conan Doyle was writing about how you shouldn't be racist in Sherlock Holmes in the 1800s, like late 1800s, turn of the century. This racism has always been a thing, but knowing that racism is bad has always been a thing, and that applies to any kind of bigotry.
Yeah,
and it means you can do anything. There are no rules, which is incredibly freeing for the kinds of people you want to be, the kind of characters you want to see, and the kind of characters you want to create.
yeah. Of course, yeah. And I think it means like when people think that it adds authenticity to like include racism or to include, I mean, violence against women is something that a lot of, like shows, like I can think of like Vikings or like there was a BBC show, or actually no, I think it was a
Last
Netflix show.
Kingdom?
Yeah, like all these shows, they're all Game of Thrones even, like there's always tons of violence towards women, and of course there's violence towards men in it as well, but the violence towards women is usually predominantly sexual. It's like a private violence instead of like out on like a battlefield. And I think women now are kind of saying, but like, why do we have to watch that every time we want to enjoy like a
We're well
historical film?
aware of that. There's not a single woman on earth that is unaware of what goes on.
Yeah, so it doesn't. And then I've had arguments about this, and the like retort is always, oh, but like that's how it was back then. And it's like, so like even if it was, like, why to enjoy something or like to watch something we have to like? And I think that goes back to women like adapting to like learn and enjoy male stories. As if I sit and watch something that like Game of Thrones, I am gonna have to watch like a violence against women in a very like personal and private way that's like like it's upsetting. And I think that like although there is violence towards men included in this, but it's not in the same way. And I don't understand. And I think people have also said this about racism, like in fantasy books and stuff. And I mean in fantasy books where it's like a totally different world and they're like different, they're not like well, I mean,
these aren't Asian people. They're just, inspired by Asian people.
Well, so the Shadow and Bone, that thing on Netflix, they're called, they're like Shu. Those basically Asian people, and they're like they say so many racist things. And like the first episode about Shu people, and it's like you're just being racist now at this point. Like you're just saying things about like what's so obviously inspired by like the Asian world.
It's clumsy.
Yeah, and it's also it just feels like like there's nothing you like. These people that like I can watch without having that like thrown in your face, and it's like, can we just I don't know.
I mean, there's a place for stories like that, but it can't be everything. Sometimes we just want our fun escapist fantasy where those sorts of things, like you can write a story where that kind of bigotry doesn't exist. That's actually possible, and actually that has its place in the great collective cultural unconsciousness as much as anything else.
Yeah,
and because there's room for both.
Yeah, of course.
Just because it's realistic doesn't mean it's appropriate for the kind of story you're telling. But whenever you make that argument, people are always just like,
counterpoint, I'm in command and I order you to stop complaining.
Yeah, definitely. You're being too like politically correct or something. I hate that phrase so much, but I always
it's so
hear that.
meaningless. It's like this whole thing like identity politics or culture wars. It's just like, what does that even mean? No, really, what does that even mean? And yeah, and this is the thing. This is when a lot of creators get attacked for that sort of thing. The amount of backlash against, again, going back to Doctor Who, when that came out, it was like, oh, you're just shoving down our throats. What? The idea that women exist?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, exactly.
I hate to break it to you, but you should already be aware of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and why does seeing a woman like outrage people so much? Like, it's so strange. Whether
they're everywhere. Yes, because they're nearly 50% of the population. Film. In my mind, films are art, and art is meant to be reflective of humanity. And when you leave certain parts of humanity out of that reflection, you're not actually reflecting humanity. You're reflecting just some guy.
Yeah, of course. And I think when we say this, I think that it is obviously a good thing that creators do listen to fans, because if they listened to us, if they listened to what people are saying, like hopefully they would like learn from this and start including stories without like unnecessary violence. I mean, actually, there's in 1999 there was a website published. It's called Women in Refrigerators.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Yeah, and it's all about like how many times women are like killed or
the cheap dramatic effects. Just like, oh, Green Lantern's got a girlfriend. Oh, that's nice. be a
Yeah.
shame if something happened to her.
Exactly. But it's something I love so much about the first New 52. I think it's the first New 52
God, yeah.
Harley Quinn comic, is that she's like walking through like a museum, and she stops at a fridge, and she opens it, and there's like dead bodies in it, and she's like, oh, I need one of these. And it's so iconic to me, because it's like that was her at that point. It's like, no, she's not going to be a woman in a refrigerator anymore. Like, she is now gonna put her like male dead bodies in there. It's very grim, but like it was such a good like turning point, I think.
And that's when I got mad.
I mean, we could go on and on and on about all the problems in comic book media regarding the representation of women, especially like I think also DC. Just because I like bringing this up all the time, DC like had a fan art contest, which required people to depict Harley Quinn dying or something.
Oh my god, I hadn't heard of that, but that's shocking.
This was a while ago. I can't remember the exact details. It may not be exactly as I'm describing, but it's something to that effect. And it's just like, it's the casualness of how completely out of touch some creators can be, which is why they need to listen to the fans. I think more importantly, I think this is why we need more fans who are writing fan fiction, getting into writing the fiction, less the fan.
Yeah, of course. That's a fan fiction's so important for that. And I think it also like the reason, because fan fiction's obviously been going on for like the longest time, but the reason that
I mean, some of the greatest works of literature have been fan fiction. Look at Dante's Inferno; it's basically just him simping over Virgil the whole time.
Well, yeah, I mean that's like our whole idea of stories. Like now, like it has to be original. It's got to be this and that. Like, but stories before, they were just retellings, of like the same story. Like you just telling it with like different context, changing the characters a little bit. Like I think we have an idea now of a story as like an original, like also like a physical object. Whereas stories in the past and the stories that we tell to each other, they were stories that we just adapted. Like my mum would tell to me, and then I would tell on, and you would change it slightly. So like everything would be fan fiction. And I think that fan fiction now is getting its like credit, and people are looking at it as something that should be like modern fan fiction is now getting its credit. And I think part of the reason why it didn't for so long, unfortunately, is because it was predominantly a female written thing. Like women were the ones doing fan fiction, and the term fangirl itself, it takes one Google search to like bring up 50 terrible derogatory connotations of the word fangirl. Like people like were not interested in what fangirls decided to be fans of. It was deemed as like a lesser thing. So I think when fangirls started to care about comic books so much, which were deemed as quite serious and were quite a masculine like dominated world, people didn't really want their opinions.
Come, Danger Boy, we must go and save that helpless damsel from the evil Dr. Nefario.
Oh, gee willikers, amazing man, we sure will.
So I almost think that like people maybe thought that fangirls' interaction with comics would like bring down their quality, or like start to be associated with the things that fangirls were, like boy bands and whatever, like kind of.
Oh no, they're gonna make it like Betty and Veronica.
Exactly, yeah.
It's ridiculous. And when you consider all the great female writers out there, and both in comics and beyond, it's clearly not the case. And yet the disparity between female creators and male creators in terms of just like the numbers, the ratio, is so completely vast and needs to change. Like, okay, so you want to tap that audience, DC? You want all that female cheddar? Hire more women.
Well, that's women are more likely to write for free, I think. Like because women are more likely to write fan
told
fiction.
They're more likely to free. I'm going to disagree with that one. They're told they're more likely to free, because at least they're given less opportunities and said, okay, you've got to start here and you've got to earn your dues. And that same conversation won't be had, at least not on such a large scale, with men. It's not that they're willing to do so; it's that it's implied to them that that's their only option.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think when when women start writing, particularly fan fiction about characters that they already love so much that are established, they're like doing it's almost like a kind of like gift economy. So so rather it's not money that they get, but it's like praise and stuff from the fan community. And I think that
Exposure.
yeah, that horrible word. Yeah,
I want
exactly.
to vomit in my mouth just saying that. Jesus.
Yeah.
And on that tasteful note, we're gonna have some ads. Check them out. There, wasn't that nice? Anyway, back to the horrible social inequality between the genders.
I know what a great topic to be having, isn't it? So cheerful.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's not a fun topic of conversation, but it's one that's worth having. And who better to have it than, for the podcast that's hosted by a man? Because let's be honest, who else is going to listen to me? And so, I mean, we talked about the creators, we talked about the fans, so I want to talk about the actual characters themselves. And we talked about, on this show in particular, great female representation and how to do it well and how not to do it well. But what I want to get down to is on a purely financial level, blurg, what makes a female character successful? What's been the track record so far?
Well, I think that right now, if you think about the way or like the wave of feminism that we're currently in, post-feminism or fourth wave, whichever one,
The
capitalism,
Me Too era.
yeah, capitalism and consumption is so tied up in it. So I think young girls are kind of taught that like feminism is something you buy. Like, you buy a pin that says feminist on it, or you
Girl boss.
yeah, exactly. So I think, and this is a cynical opinion, but I do think that comic creators have kind of tapped into the idea that, so for young girls, buying a Harley Quinn comic is a feminist action because you are buying like a comic that, like the comic books now that are like portraying her as a kind of feminist character. Just to buy one is actually kind of being told to young girls that that's you doing feminism. Like you've done a feminist action by buying that. So I think that their comic book creators are really lucky at the moment because they're publishing in this time where feminism and consumption are so tied up together. So people will buy the comics just based on the fact that there's gonna be like a slither of feminism in it, because like to that it is kind of a feminist action just to buy it. That's what I
I
think
mean,
anyway.
I did the same, but I was just buying a copy of Henrik Ibsen's The Dollhouse. That was my
Yeah.
feminist action. It's slightly different, but basically the same thing. And that's not untrue, but it's very much dependent on the comic you're buying, the quality, how the character is represented, and even then, it's only like a tiny bit. Like you got to take it a bit further.
Yeah, definitely. I would say you've got to take it a bit further, but I don't know if creators are like doing that. I think that they are, because if they were actually like interrogating their own processes and having like serious conversations about, how we can go about achieving maybe like more equality in this like superhero community, there would be more kind of there'd be more like female creators being hired. There would be more, even if you think about kind of Comic-Con conventions and stuff like that. I feel like there would be more, I don't know, inclusion or more
There'll
of
be
an
less
effort.
panels where it's like women in comics and all the panelists are men.
Yeah, exactly. I think there would, like, at the moment, it does seem to me like what the only thing that they are doing is like having people buy things. Especially even like if you think about the fact that like the movies are getting made, the idea is that you go and like, but to be fair, like the movies that came out recently have all had female directors, which is great. And
Well, it'd be
unusual.
better if the movies themselves were better, but that's not the fact that they're women's fault.
Yeah, of course, but also men have had so many, like men have made like terrible, especially I
Oh
would
god,
even
yeah.
say in the Marvel movies, like some of them are not good and they have chance and chance again. But I feel like when a female director gets a big movie like that, everyone's kind of like waiting with bated breath. But like give them a chance to make like one that isn't that great. And
People are
then
still giving David S. Goyle work. I don't know why.
yeah, like we don't have to. I think people really like, as you said earlier, actually, like people would go and say that the reason it was bad, was because it was directed by a woman, and usually there's so many other things going on there, studio interference, stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, women can make bad movies. That's not
In
unusual,
a
I'm
fair
sure.
and egalitarian society, women can suck just as much as the rest of us.
Yeah,
We're all
exactly.
awful.
As long as they have equal opportunity to suck just as much.
Rat shit, bat shit, dirty old twat. 69 assholes tied in a knot. Hooray! Lizard shit, fuck!
That's humanity.
Exactly.
Oh god. And so this is the question. See, I mean, sometimes we will stumble on a character that is truly feminist and is great representation, whether willfully, knowingly, or just by on accident. So what really causes that resonance with the audience? Is it just the lack of other representation, or is it something more?
Well, I think if Harley Quinn in particular, quite a few scholars have said this, and I do tend to agree that the reason, if you look at Harley Quinn, she could really be thought of as a fangirl herself, especially at the start. Like she
Oh,
is.
Mr. J.
Exactly, and she displays like characteristics which fangirls were kind of also stereotyped as. You know, she's a bit obsessive. She's a bit
A bit.
exactly. So I think Harley Quinn was, or like why people were drawn to her initially anyway, was because she, you know, it mirrored them. And actually, I would have to just point out that like not all, there wasn't all women that really enjoyed Harley Quinn at the start. People, again, because instead of like questioning the creators, they were more likely to question the character. They would say things like, you know, why is she doing that? Like, why doesn't she just leave? Like, she's like, why like leave the Joker? I mean, like, she's the one
Yeah, but
that's staying.
that's. I mean, I completely get where you're coming from. But that is a very when someone is in an abusive relationship, that's a very shitty thing to say because it's deeper than that.
Yeah.
And we've got a character like Harley Quinn who really wears her emotions on her sleeve, and is so unabashedly unashamed to feel and say what she thinks and say what she likes, which is one of the reasons I like her. Um, and you have people out there who will take advantage of that, sadly. This is one of the things that I hate about the Suicide Squad movie, was showing that their relationship was actually quite loving and deep and like, oh, it was true
Yeah.
love. No. I know it was like 25 years when they came out, when she'd been around, so they're trying something new, but no, maybe don't. If the fucking cartoon show can show a somewhat naturalistic representation of an abusive relationship, why can't this multi-million-dollar live action film?
Yeah, no, of course, and I think that it is dangerous to portray Harley Quinn like as a, like there's kind of stereotype of like a blameworthy victim, which
Oh, God,
is
yeah.
like horrific, but it is a kind of stereotype of people that can't like won't leave abusive relationships. But obviously, it's so much more like and deeper than that. They can't just leave. But when Mad Love was published, the FBI also announced, I think either in the same year or like a year later, that a man beat his wife or girlfriend every 12 seconds in America. And
I
so,
believe that statistic.
yeah, so if you think about the fact that Mad Love was, and I'm not saying like, obviously Mad Love and comic books represent like not all of culture or anything like that, but you know, this was people's reality and this was something that they were going through, which was really difficult. And Mad Love kind of represented this relationship as like horrific, like the abuse was terrible. But because you had Harley Quinn, I think halfway through the comics she starts like it's her own narrative, because at the start I think it's like told through the perspective of Batman, and then like midway through Harley starts telling her story. And she really, when you have a character telling you their story from like themselves, they're really telling you how you should think about it. You know, like they're saying, oh, this guy is like this, so you think about it that way. And she really kind of defends the Joker, and you know, says all this nice stuff about him. And I think that, and also, as we said at the start, at the end of the comic, she gets thrown out a window and gets put in the hospital. And it's really dangerous, because at the very last panel, I think a doctor or nurse says to her, like, how did it feel like giving up everything for a man that would do nothing for you? And she like turns to her bedside and she sees that he left a rose at her hospital bed, and she is like beginning to say, oh, like it felt terrible, like, you know, like as if she was going to leave him. And she sees the rose, and then she says it felt like a kiss. And then obviously she stays with
Oh.
them. And it's like that, I mean, like that what are you trying to say with that kind of message? Like that is a
Oh
dangerous
no!
message.
This is much worse.
Yeah, so I mean, it is dangerous. And when you think about the type of people that are reading the comics, like, I mean, the age demographic, which is quite varied, but I do think it's directed a lot towards younger people. It's not good. Like, it's not good to have that knowledge. And Mad Love, of course, was first a TV episode for like children before it was a
Yeah.
comic. So
I'm
um
sorry, I didn't get the joke.
yeah, it's so sad, isn't it? My heart really breaks for in that comic when I've like read it again like recently. um Yeah, it's so sad. And I think that
But then you've got that, I think, laid the foundation, though, for other stories to show her breaking free of the Joker in video games, in movies, and even in comic series.
hmm
Cartoon series, rather.
hmm
When we look at the Harley Quinn TV show, which has its
hmm
issues, but ultimately is resonating a lot with fans because of how it shows Harley establishing her own identity and
yeah.
getting much more, despite still being a villain, having a much more positive and healthy relationships with other people.
Yeah, the one that came out like fairly recently, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. That TV show is so good, and I think that it does like that wouldn't have happened without like fangirl engagement. Though I honestly think if fangirls hadn't taken Harley Quinn and really, really championed her, that none of this development would have happened. We wouldn't have had, a Harley Quinn movie. We wouldn't have had this new TV show, and I think we really do have the female fans to thank for that because they were the ones that started writing Harley Quinn in a different way. They were the ones that started, writing her as having maybe a nicer, more loving relationship with Poison Ivy. There's so many fan fictions out there which are
And then you've
Harley
got
Quinn.
Sorry, and then you've got people like Margot Robbie, who's also a fan, using
Yeah,
her influence and using her power to actually get stories like that made on a much more mainstream level.
exactly. That's it. Like Harley Quinn to me is a completely fan-made character. Obviously, when she was first introduced, she was created by the what was it Bruce Timm and Paul
Bruce
Dini.
Tim, Bruce Tim and Paul Dini, one of whom is a bit of a predator. I don't know which one. Apparently, he's got like weird sexual things. Like he made the Batman and Harley Quinn animated movie,
Mm.
which was not good. It's really not good. Like, oh god, what were they thinking? It's no, I'm not gonna even talk about that. And so that's that movie though is interesting considering what we're talking about because initial point of contact, the creators, Bruce Timm, Paul Dini, make the character. Then time goes on, she becomes more and more owned by the fans, becomes more influenced by the fans,
hmm
and to the point where she becomes this huge pop culture icon. Then the creators return and try and do it their way,
Yeah.
and it's nowhere near as successful. And then they stop doing that, and she goes right back to what she was doing before,
hmm
which everyone goes back to loving.
hmm Yeah, I think, and that's quite a good like point of how much control and ownership do creators have over their characters or even their stories. Once they put them out into the world, people can interpret them and take them in kind of any way that they want. And most of the time, once they've done it, it is out of their hands.
Because death of the author is a
hmm
well-established phenomenon, but when you have a character that's long-running, that's been going on for 30 years, 60 years, 100 years,
hmm
and passed through as many creators, if not more so, again, it goes back to this idea of where does the ownership lie? Death of the author, death of the creator, death of the character, because it's gone through so many different kinds of metamorphosis.
Yeah.
And I have no point. I'm just saying things because, as we've established, I'm not a doctor.
No, but you're right. Like but whether I think when we think of like death of the author, I think it's usually quite well like a negative thing. But I think it's actually maybe an a a progression because it's like a more collaborative process between the person creating the art and the person receiving the art, and it's like rather than having one person molding something and putting it out into the world, like people are molding it together. And I think that that means that the art becomes like a conversation with the audience and with the creator, and that can ultimately create better art and also, well, I was going to say, and also sell more, which is not good. But like I think that whether they're doing it to sell comics or not, ultimately it creates a relationship which I think it's where we're going, and it's also it's a better relationship in the sense that you want to have some control over your consumption, and the idea that you can control exactly what you're consuming by influence the creators that are writing it, it's quite powerful, and I think it's a good idea. I think you can quite quickly maybe make dystopian remarks about it, but I also think that it would be a good move forward.
Yeah, and this is when indie comics or less mainstream outside of like the big two, the big three comics come in, because that's sort of like the middle ground between fan fiction, Marvel, DC, and I guess maybe Image,
hmm
possibly Dark Horse. I don't know. Those sorts of comics where they actually are completely female led and evolve beyond fan fiction, or is it zines or zines? I can never remember.
Oh, I mean, I say zines, but maybe it's zines. I don't know.
Because it's like short for magazines. I don't know. And I've read so many great comics about that kind of stuff, and it's interesting when you're trying to sell a product, but you're doing it for yourself. You're not bowing to corporate overlords, but also you can still have that connection with the audience.
Yeah. And yeah, and I think that you see fan fiction creators as well, though, really kind of struggle with that, because although having a connection with the audience is good, there's also people can be nasty online, and if things aren't,
this is a kick in the knickers.
if something's not going the way they wanted it, I think that they can have quite a lot of abuse thrown at them, and they don't have the protection of like the company that they're working for if it's just yourself publishing online. So I think that's kind of the downside to it.
And this is when it comes. At what point does fan ownership become fan entitlement?
It's a tricky line to walk, I think.
Because I mean, I'm a fan of many things, and I'm incredibly entitled. I make demands of shit all the time. It usually backfires. I want a Fantastic Four reboot. Wait, no, not that. No.
So yeah, you're who we have to blame for that. You asked for that.
Yes, I thought, okay, it's time. It's been long enough. We want. Oh, what's that? The director of Chronicle. Well, I love that movie. He should be great. He did what now? Oh no. I blame myself more than, I blame Josh Trank, but I blame myself.
Yeah, I'm glad you're taking personal responsibility for that one.
Yeah, just that one though. Okay, most of the other requests that I have actually turned out pretty good for the most part. I don't actually think they're listening to me. I think I just put that out in the universe. The universe just like, well, gonna punish you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm used to being so disappointed. I said briefly earlier that I was like a Zutara shipper, so like anything I wanted to happen, and
you get what you deserve.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'm really like just karma from that forever now.
Oh god, and this, and I mean, shipping is a good place to jump off with that sort of thing because fans really ship two characters together. And sometimes those characters have really great chemistry and would work well together in terms of the narrative and their individual character dynamics. Other characters don't. And I often find that sometimes when creators embrace that shipping and actually think, oh, this is going to work, like with Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy, for better or for worse, in terms of how they handle that, it can work out really well. Other times they try and resist that and they pay for it. Something that I'm not familiar with, but has been pointed out to me a couple of times, is this show called The 100.
Yes. Oh, yeah. That's a very good example of some like shipping wars.
And also like actually, I think going back to superheroes, actually, it was the Supergirl TV show and the relationship between Kara and Lena Luthor. And I think it was one of the other cast members just like, nope, that's not a thing. I killed it. And fans did not like that at all. They were just like, okay, look, if you don't want to make that in part of the show, that's fine. Let us have our fantasies, man. Jesus.
Of course, and that's actually a really interesting thing is when like actors or creators actually mention the shipping and like talk about it. It's such like a fourth wall shattering moment for them to talk about it. Like on the Graham Norton show, I remember once he pulled out like fan art from the X-Men movies, and I was just like, oh my god, it's weird to have the actors like actually comment on what's going on like in the fandom.
Professor X and Magneto are baking cupcakes together.
Yeah, exactly. And they'll sometimes ask people like, oh, do you ever read any of your fan fiction? And like I think it puts the actors in such an awkward place, but I also think it puts the fans in an awkward place because I think a lot of the time they're writing the fan fiction in a kind of way that they don't think anyone will ever see it, and like when it's called out like that, and it's almost like you're not writing it in the public eye. You're not writing it in like the public sphere. You're doing it like privately in your home. So like to have it
for a niche audience at most, just
exactly.
like a loose collection of people on the internet. When it's broadcasted, I mean, you put it out on the internet, so public domain, whatever you want to call it. But at the same time, yeah, it's like, I mean, on one hand, it's good because it's people's private fantasies or enthusiasms or admiration, but when it's suddenly revealed to the world, on the one hand that's a good thing. Like, you should be expressive about the things you love and how many ideas for this kind of thing you have, but at the same time when you're showing it to fucking Michael Fassbender, like it's a little bit.
What you did was sneaky, underhanded, and downright distasteful. I loved it.
Exactly. And I think as well, like, I can't speak for all of the fans, but a lot of the time they don't want
I
that.
can.
Like, they don't want to have that. They're like the actual actors or creators talking about it, like, because a lot of the time they don't have very good things to say, and I guess it's quite like disheartening.
Yeah. And sometimes they get a little bit into it themselves, just like, ooh, one of us. Oh, don't be weird about it. Don't be weird about it.
Yeah.
And sometimes the inverse of that, just all in the middle, you get some people who are just like,
Here's me on the scale of caring. I'm at 0.
and it's like, what do you even do with that?
Yeah, exactly. And especially because, they'll say like the stock line of like, oh, well, we owe everything to our fans, but like, oh, I don't bother with that and stuff. And it's like, well, okay. there's nothing you to take from it at all then.
I mean, because I've not I've interviewed lots of different people on this show, but I've not interviewed like big Hollywood celebrities.
Hmm.
At least not yet. Who knows? Maybe with time, someone will. But one of the questions I always want to ask them in my mind would be, did you ever read the comics? On the one hand, you want to know if they are fans or if they're familiar with the character. But on the other hand, let's not forget, these are people who are just there to do a job.
Hmm.
And it's okay if they aren't familiar with them. And it feels like kind of like a gotcha question, like, oh, you didn't know what happened in issue 26 of The Amazing Burger Man. I don't know. and it's like, it's a little bit gatekeeping-y, which is
Yeah.
a good jumping on point for that whole thing, because when it comes to like accessibility with any sort of media, whether it be comics or movies or video games or like tabletop role-playing games, gatekeeping is such a huge problem that's almost exclusively directed towards women.
Yeah, definitely.
And so when you have characters like great female characters or characters that appeal to a female audience, broadly speaking, and then you've also got other fans of that same comic saying, yeah, but are you a real fan?
Hmm.
Bitch, it's aimed at me!
Yeah. No, completely. And that kind of comes back to fan entitlement as well, because there's also the kind of idea that that whoever is cast in these things needs to know absolutely everything about the character and about the comic, and before they can even be deigned like worthy to actually take on the part.
And then and worst part, some people take that as a challenge or feel like they have to do that, and then they're just like,
I'd like to spend my vacation at the library!
Yeah,
and
exactly.
you can't really do that, because I'm a huge Marvel fan, but you know what? Could I answer any question about what's happened to Marvel now? No. Could I answer every question that's happened to Marvel in the past when I was reading comics? No. Before that, no, because we're talking about an industry that is so wide, so vast, and so varied. There's so many different things going on. No one can know everything.
Yeah, of
You
course.
just can't. Like to meet the person who could, but they'd
Yeah.
probably be some weirdo with presumably millions in the bank account, but no social life.
Yeah, exactly. It's a massive universe, so you wouldn't be able to know everything.
Let's just have fun enjoying these things. The question shouldn't be, oh, do you know this? No. Oh, well, then you're not a real fan.
Hmm.
The answer should be, do you like this? Yes. Cool, me too.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And then there would be maybe like more acceptance among the community, because I do feel like there's unwritten rules that you need to follow, or that you need to, like have opinions about, or like as you said, there's things that like as a community as a whole, they're like big events that like you need to know about, otherwise you're not a real fan and stuff like that. And it's quite exhausting.
I mean, I'm the most judgmental person in the world. I mean, I judge you for not seeing Ted Lasso season 1. And I judge you hard. You've gone down to my eyes, Elise. But at the same time, that doesn't mean you can't watch the show or you don't like TV. You're allowed to disagree with people. You're allowed to say, oh, how can you not see this? Even though that is a stupid thing to say by my own admission. But that's just an opportunity for people to get into the thing you're talking about. Not like media, stories are not rare, precious, sacred things. They're meant
Yep.
to be shared. There's enough for everyone. And it's just people that want to feel like, oh, they're part of the cool kids club, which is a very uncool thing to want.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, people think I think with comics especially, because they were quite like maybe for like No, I mean, obviously you would struggle to find somebody now who like didn't know who Iron Man was, but like a few or maybe even a decade ago,
2007.
yeah, it would have been a bit more difficult. I think it was more of like an underground situation. Well, and Marvel did that like on purpose, like picked comic or characters that were maybe a little bit more unknown. But my point is that like at the time, I think if you were to like people didn't want it to come out almost, it's like a nice little secret, like they don't want it to be successful almost in a way. And then
I
when
mean,
it
I completely get it, because that happened to me when I was first watching those movies. Just like, I've been a Marvel fan for years,
Mm,
and now that I'm getting this thing and it's getting popular, it's just like, am I special anymore? But here's the
mhm.
thing: if you derive your sense of individualism from movies you watch, then you're not really a person. You're a vessel for other people's stories and ideas. And you can identify as a Marvel fan. I identify as a Marvel fan.
Mhm.
But that's not the sum total of me, and that's not how I derive my sense of self-worth. I'm glad that so many other people are watching these movies. I'm glad that they become so popular. I'm
Mhm.
less glad they become so popular that some people can openly criticize them, but that's
Mhm.
just my personal thing, and I'm gonna have to deal with that like a big boy.
But yeah, I think it's like almost a natural human like instinct to be a little bit gatekeepy at first, right? Like something that you loved so much and suddenly you realize other people love it, you do kind of feel like, oh, wait a minute. But then it's a good feeling to let
I'm
go
not
of as well.
special anymore.
Yeah, I mean, especially when if you're seeing that thing become so influenced by like outside forces that it usually wouldn't be as well, you're gonna have feelings about it.
Yeah, it's so, considering everything we've talked about so far, here's the question I pose to you, Elise. How can we make this industry, how can we make the comic industry, the relationship between fans and creators better? Fix sexism for me. Go.
Wow. Yeah, maybe after my like at the end of my PhD, I'll let you know. But I think that it's what we've said. Like we need to have more female creators. We need to have more or a better understanding of what we actually want from female characters. They don't have to be like stock images or caricatures of people. They can be complex and they can
We'll
be.
always have archetypes, but you can
Mhm.
have variety of archetypes.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose it's a bit tricky as well when you're asked, like, because superheroes are a bit caricature, aren't they? Like, they literally are stereotypes. So it might be a bit much to ask for so much diversity in, one character. But I think that the way Marvel is going anyway, the exploration Marvel has, like, you can basically make, like, however many different characters you wanted
I
and
would
how many
never
different.
confuse She-Hulk for Storm for multiple reasons. I would never confuse Scarlet Witch for the Wasp, and there's and that's good. I shouldn't be able, they should not be interchangeable. And so when you have this diversity on the page, diversity behind the page, and we've already got a diversity of fans.
Mhm.
So honestly, I think the conclusion we can come to is that the industry needs to keep up with us. We set the pace and they follow it, rather than the other way around.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Yeah, exactly. The industry is probably always playing catch up with us, though, and I think that they will continue to, like, for lack of a better word, copy from fans and from what like fans do. I think fan fiction will stay so massively influential, and I think they will keep like appropriating things that happen in fan fiction to come into the comics.
Next issue, Captain America becomes pregnant. It could happen. If he can be a fucking Hydra's sleeper agent all this time, he can be pregnant. And on that weird ass note, I think we're going to end this show. Thank you very much, Elise, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
And if you enjoy the show, Capers, please tell your friends. Shout it from the rooftops. And if you haven't already, go back and listen to some of our other super episodes, like the Creating Women episode we had a few episodes ago. That was a lot of fun. You can listen to the show on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, or at podcapers.com. If you want to get in touch with us, suggest show topics, or maybe come on the show yourself, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at AP2HYC. Thank you very much to Dan Harris for our logo, the lovely microphone, the red and blue 3D glasses. Those are mine. And thank you for listening. This has been Podcapers, the official podcast of a place to hang your cape. Cue the music!